Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.
Welcome to Making It Last podcast. I'm your host, Nuri Daly, and it's all about helping you to have better relationships, not just with yourselves, but with other people. Now, I have with me two individuals who, as one, refer to the other as her spiritual partner. And I love that label. He probably didn't know, but here I am telling him. So I have Kenecia, McDonald, and Lincoln Liking. Two individuals here on this Christian journey willing to share to help to make all of us better. Now, what we're going to be talking about this time is how can guarding the avenues of our soul impact our spiritual connection with the Most High? And I'm going to have both of them comment on two aspects of it right now before we get into the conversation, which is the whole idea of guarding the avenues of our soul. What does that mean?
I think I'll I'll go ahead. That's an interesting question. And you have to ask, what exactly are the avenues of your souls? And essentially what you're talking about is your senses. The things that allow information into you, into the core of you. You know, your sight, your hearing, your taste, your touch. You're talking about guarding your senses against things that will, quote unquote, war against your soul.
Okay. Kenecia?
All right. So when I think about the topic and I focus on the word guarding, it means to protect, to be cautious, to be careful of the things that you let in. And as Lincoln openly and rightfully said in his statement, that avenues are referring to those things, those organs that are used to allow things, your senses, to come in to your vessel, so to speak. So the things that we watch, the music that we listen to, and whether we want to believe it or not, our friendships and the conversations that we have from time to time, we need to be very careful. We take it for granted. If you're like me, I'm a very daring individual, and there are times where I allow myself to be in situations that I know I should not be in. But
You're testing yourself.
I'm testing myself, and I probably convince myself that, you know what, girl, you can stand this test. But I don't understand, or I'm not thinking of the fact that the more you put yourself in a situation that you shouldn't be in, the more comfortable you get. And so this whole idea of guarding the avenues of your soul, I'm not doing that if I keep putting myself in a situation just because I am testing myself, so to speak. If it is that we can avoid these situations, we should. And a lot of times we simply just need to walk away. We don't need to. I used to say to my niece, not everything in life you need to try. Not every food. Somebody asked me, why don't you eat pork outside of the fact that you're an Adventist? And I said, I honestly don't think that I need to try everything. I don't. It's not a matter of life or death. At my age, it's really a choice. You understand? So we have to be very careful and conscious about the things that we partake of, the friendships that we keep, the conversations that we have, the places that we go. Even if you believe that you are strong enough, if you don't need to do it, don't do it. Because there's a thought that we say all the time, or a quotation where we say practice makes perfect.
Yes.
In this situation, the more you do the thing, the more comfortable you're going to get. And after a while, it won't feel like you're doing something wrong. Or like you're leaving yourself open for the devil to come in and for these things to affect your spiritual lives. So if you don't need to do it, don't do it.
We're going to elaborate on some of the things that were alluded to earlier, but the whole idea of Most High. I specifically coined it that way because not everybody who's listening would refer to God, or there are other ways of referring to somebody who you feel who is that higher being.
Yes.
Yes. So that's deliberate. Now, Kenecia specifically said in terms of things that you watch, and Lincoln alluded in terms of the senses. Now, speak to us about that when you live in a society where sometimes you do have some level of control over what you watch.
Yes.
Yeah.
But sometimes you don't necessarily have so much control. So give me some feedback on that. What do you do? Just don't watch TV?
All right. So there are two things, two aspects to this whole issue of guarding the avenues to your soul and your spiritual connection that I want to touch on. The first one is health.
Okay.
Now, I don't think people realize how important health is to your spiritual experience.
Okay.
When you read the Bible, especially if you really get into the Levitical laws and the high priest, you'll realize the high priest was essentially a doctor. That's really who he was.
Okay.
And a lot of the work he did was to ensure that the persons maintained, the children of Israel maintained good health.
Good health.
One of the first things God did when bringing the children of Israel into the wilderness was to change their diet. And then he made them walk a lot. Coming out of Israel, they were very sick. Going into Israel, the Bible, going into the promised land, the Bible says there was none feeble among them. Health is so important to your spiritual experience, and that's why I think the devil works so hard to make people sick. And if you remember the trial of Job, he took away Job's financial resources. Job was okay. But then he said, let me touch his body.
Yes.
And the bulk of Job's suffering came from the fact that his health had been taken from him. So one of the things I tell people is guard your health. If you want a wonderful spiritual experience, pay a lot of attention to your health, because the enemy is coming to take your health. He knows that once you're sick, he has access to your soul. So that's one.
Yeah.
The second one is stories. Now, I am big on stories. Stories have made a significant impact on my life. And again, it's one of those things that we see as simple but don't realize how profound it is. A story is really how we learn. And there's this book called Wired for Story. And essentially, the book talks about how our brains are configured. And it says that we are not logic. Human beings are not logic processors. Human beings are story processors. We learn through story. And therefore, the stories you watch determines what you learn and how you behave. And I tell people that there is no more powerful educational tool in the world than Hollywood.
Yep.
Because all they do is tell stories.
Yep.
And I try to encourage my fellow religion majors and other ministers, don't ignore the power of story. The Bible says of Jesus, without a story, he did not teach. Why? Because he made us and he knows how we're designed. We were made for story. So with that said, you have to be careful the stories that you watch. Because even if on a conscious level you don't realize it, subconsciously your mind is unraveling the lessons in that story. And it's changing your character.
Whoa.
But it's not just about looking at it. It's about enjoying it. Today, when I look at stories, I pay attention to all the stories, all the things in popular culture that people pay attention to. That's what I pay attention to. I just see it from a different perspective. What are the people learning? And so therefore, I'm able to minister to them because I understand where their philosophy, what their philosophy is, where their mind is. So the reason I bring this up is to say, if you're guarding the avenue of your soul and its impact on your spiritual experience, be careful of the stories that you pay attention to. Be careful of the stories that your children pay attention to, because those stories are transforming them into that image. The Bible has a story, the world has a story, and therefore that's something we need to pay keen attention to.
Came back earlier, you said the whole idea of or associations and friends. Add to that a little bit for me, please.
We were created to socialize, right? And we would like to think that we could be or can be a friend to all men. And so we tell ourselves, all right, so we can have friends who are of different backgrounds, whether religiously or otherwise, and we are able to maintain who we are when we are associating with these different individuals. The truth, though, is, based on my experience and observation over the years, is that we tend to adapt. And especially if we don't know who we are and we're not strong individuals, when you're with certain persons, you completely put aside. It's like you take this piece of your character and you put it aside, or you put it in your handbag so that you can fit in. And I don't think a lot of times we're conscious of it and we're careful. And the truth is, when we're alone sometimes and we're evaluating and we think about some of the people in our lives, we know that we really need to avoid hanging out with that person. So when I'm with you, there's this different kind of feeling, and it's not anything godly. But I keep going back for whatever reason. And I'm not talking now about a male-female relationship, because it happens even in regular relationships between girlfriends or two or a group of people. And so we're not conscious of it. A lot of times, sometimes we just let it happen because we want to maybe please others. And so we have to be careful of that. We have to be conscious. The truth, though, is it's not easy to be honest with people the way we know we should be. So you put something to me as a friend, I'm not comfortable with it, but then I don't say anything to you. So you call me on a Friday night, for example, and you say, come, K-Mac, let's just go down to, I don't know, one of those places in Mandeville, Gizmos or whatever. While it is that I want to hang out with you, I really don't want to go. It's Friday night. I want to be home. I've been worship. But at the same time, I want to please you. I want to make sure that I am maintaining my friendship with you. And say, I would just say, oh, well, let me just go. It's just one time. And it's just food. But really, it's not, because I go there and I'm really not comfortable, but I'm smiling. And when you continue to do that over time, you realize that it becomes normal. It becomes normal because you're denying your conscience, you're denying yourself, and you're doing something simply to please somebody else. And over time, it makes you quite uncomfortable, you know. But we just need to get to a place where you know what the truth is, and you're adamant that you're going to do this thing regardless of. And I think it comes down to trust in God. If something is for you, God will allow it. So if Miss Daly Miss Daly calls me on a Friday night and says, let's go have dinner somewhere. And I know this place is not just your regular dining. And I say to Miss Daly, listen, it's Friday night, it's my Sabbath, I need to be home worshiping. And I invite you and you don't want to come, and you get upset with me, and we realize that the friendship goes downhill from then maybe it's not a friendship I'm supposed to have. But it's not as easy.
Yeah.
It's not as easy.
It takes work.
It takes a lot of work. But sometimes we just need to start. Pray and ask God for the strength to do what is right. And if somebody's meant to be in your life, then they will remain in your life.
Your final thoughts, Lincoln, as we're wrapping up?
Well, I was thinking about what K-Mac said and about associations and just a couple of things on that. You know, the Bible talks about, bad company corrupting good habits. And therefore we need to think about who we associate with, definitely. One of the things that amazed me about Jesus is that Jesus was the only sinless person on this earth, and he was surrounded by sinners constantly, but he himself never sinned. And not only that, but sinners loved him. When you think about that, they always wanted to be around him. And it talks about the nature of his character and his personality, that even though he himself was perfect, he never made persons feel less than anything because they were welcomed around him. And I think, and by being that way, he transformed them. They didn't transform him. So that's something I think we could take into consideration. But just in general, I just like to say that guard well the avenues of your soul. They're really important. The things we take lightly are really important. I mentioned health and I mentioned the stories that you watch. Very, very important that we focus on those things.
Final thoughts, K-Mac?
I thought of, while Lincoln was talking about Jesus and the fact that he was around all of these different persons, mostly sinners, and he sinned not. Jesus was able to do that because he had a deep connection with God. So we need to be careful how we experiment. So if you know that you're not spiritually grounded and spiritually strong, don't experiment. Get there first. And then you do the experiment, right? And then when you do that, the idea is not to simply please people, but to ensure that when you go among these people, that your behavior, the words, your conversations are bringing them to Christ.
Thank you so much, Lady Angent. This was Making It Last podcast with your host, Noreen Daly. Until next time.
Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.